Gather round, everyone, and prepare to be swept away by the thrilling exploits of Gino Cuddy, Clive Davis, and Nick Sheehan as they embark on a daring journey across the silent screen. They'll ride through the annals of film history, recounting the captivating saga of the silver screen's very first Western superstar. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Hart to Hart, the William S. Hart podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 15 of Hart to Hart, the William S. Hart podcast. I'm, of course, one of your hosts, Gino Cuddy, and I'm here with my regular co-hosts, Clive Davis and Nick Sheehan. This is going to be likely one of our last episodes for quite some time because we're getting to the end of the William S. Hart filmography, at least the filmography that's been made available to us. There are going to be a few strands and a few outliers that we probably will get to at some point, but for now, we're going to close the book with this episode. And during this episode, we're going to be discussing the film's three-word brand and Tumbleweeds. And for Tumbleweeds, we're actually going to be joined by my friend, noted filmmaker and the director of the Museum of Western Film History, Mr. Steve Latshaw. But first, let's get into the first film that we're going to be discussing tonight, which is Three-Word Brand, which was released October 16th, 1921. It was produced by the William S. Hart Company and distributed by Paramount Artcraft. It was directed by Lambert Hillier with a screenplay by Lambert Hillier from a story by Will Reynolds, and it was photographed by Joe August. The cast consists of Three-Word Brand, Paul Marsden, and Ben Trago, all three of those characters being portrayed by William S. Hart, George Barton being portrayed by S.J. Bingham, Ethel Barton being portrayed by Jane Novak, Bull Yates being portrayed by Gordon Russell, John Murray being portrayed by George C. Pierce, Jean being portrayed by Colette Forbes, Solly being portrayed by Ivor McFadden, Carol being portrayed by Herschel Mayall, and McKay being portrayed by Leo Willis. And the plot of this film is Ben Trago, a Western pioneer, sends his twin boys to safety and stays to fight a band of Indians who surround his wagon. To make sure that the boys will escape, he blows the Indians and himself to pieces with his stock of gunpowder. When the boys grow to manhood, they are both living in Utah, but are strangers to each other, having been adopted by different persons whose names they have taken. One of the brothers is named Marsden and is governor of the state. The other is known as Three-Word Brand because of his economy of speech. He is part owner of a ranch, his partner being George Barton, whose pretty sister, on her arrival from the east, sees Brand giving a thieving cowboy a well-merited beating. Miss Ethel at once decides that she can never like her brother's partner. The owners of the adjoining ranch put up a job to accuse George Barton of murder, and he is thrown in jail. This is a scheme to get Barton out of the way, as he and Brand are against a crooked bill to have the water rights controlled by the state and the water supply put into the hands of the politicians. The governor is being urged to sign the bill. Before doing so, he resolves to go to the valley and investigate the matter himself. Brand sees him, notes the strong resemblance between them, and sees a scheme and sets a scheme of his own in motion. He has his foreman keep the governor in the wilderness for 5 days and goes to the capital at Salt Lake City. Here, Brand impersonates the governor, kills the water rights bill, and signs a pardon for Barton. In the meantime, the leader of the gang on the next ranch has shot the governor, believing him to be Brand. When the ranch owner returns from the capital, the brothers learn the truth about each other, and Ethel decides that she is willing to become Brand's wife. Now, I thought this was a pretty interesting one because, you have William S. Hart pulling an Eddie Murphy here, playing three different roles. Mm-hmm. I gotta say, like right up front, like, and you guys will probably concur with me, the special effects in this movie are amazing as far as how they were able to have William S. Hart be in the same room with himself. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really, really well done. I mean, I don't think this is one of his best films, but I do think it's one of his better later films, certainly. And
it's interesting to see him get to do the dual role thing, right? I think,
or triple role thing.
Well, triple role, yes. That's that's probably the most interesting aspect above and beyond the actual kind of story, right?
Right. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, he's quite. It's funny. He's quite natural in the scenes, especially near the. We only really get a couple of scenes right near the very end where he actually sits with himself and has a conversation. But it is a very natural. Like normally you're looking for the seam or you're looking for the awkward. You like the tell, and there isn't really one, as you said. It's quite a surprisingly sophisticated whatever they did, in terms of having him on screen in two places at once. But like I've seen things made in the 50s and 60s that were far less convincing in this using, having an actor play multiple roles. So yeah.
Or fucking 1978 Game of Death, like
Mm,
badly kind of superimposed photograph of Bruce Lee on someone's
yes.
face.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah, yeah, you're right, It's surprisingly sophisticated in with regards to the special effects. Um, but yeah, I quite like this. I mean, again, I often do for some reason. Maybe I'm just a sucker at this point for William S. Hart, but um, I this is definitely a bit more comedic. It's a bit more lighthearted maybe than some of the other ones. Like the opening scene, notwithstanding, where the children are orphaned, right? That was kind of quite a tough opening scene for what then becomes a much more kind of lighthearted romp almost, right? I mean, I think the strongest parts of this film for me are actually the parts where three-word Brand, right, who is the tougher, more monosyllabic version of William S. Hart, where he has to pretend to be the governor brother, right? And obviously, and be in a milieu that he's not comfortable in, right? Where he goes to the governor's mansion, he's like, "Holy crap, this place is huge and everything's shiny." And then there's a bit of comedy where he accidentally hits a button that calls somebody to the office and stuff.
Calls a cop to the office, nonetheless.
Right. Yes. And so I felt
He's good
like,
at doing that flustered face, isn't he, William S. Hart?
yes.
Yes.
I would say probably, and I'm not alone in this. There is quite a good review of this on Movies Silently, which the same point is brought up. Maybe slightly disappointing is it would have been nice to have seen more of the governor brother having his moment of discomfort out in the Wild West. Like we don't really see much of what he gets up to, and it feels a bit like a wasted opportunity. You could have maybe milked some more comedy out of that. It ends quite abruptly, it feels to me, like in
Yeah,
the but yeah, both films do have a slightly kind of a jarring. Suddenly, we're at the end. Um,
yeah. It's like they couldn't write themselves out of a paper bag type deal.
like, um,
No,
especially Tumbleweeds. Funnily enough, when suddenly she like because they have to wrap up the whole romantic subplot in that, and they do it in like literally 10 seconds of screen time. I was like, wait, there's like no dialogue. She just suddenly goes like, you know what, I was wrong, but she doesn't even say that. She just shouts his name, Dom, and then
Yeah,
and that's the end of the movie.
right.
But in this one as well, I feel like there's a sudden the brother gets
Yeah,
shot.
it yeah, yeah, it doesn't feel like the plot has, been resolved or anything has been resolved because, yeah, he gave Barton the pardon uh and he struck down the water bill, but he's still got to contend with these people because they said, "Oh, well, we're going to give you a real hot seat here in the governor's
Yes,
office." And then my favorite part of this film is when Hart tells, I believe it's Carol, played by Herschel Mayall, literally tells him, "Go to hell." I
yes,
love that.
yes, yes, yes. His three-word. Occasionally he breaks his three-word rule, but that's one of the best uses of three words. And then finally, at the very end, when he says "I love you," right? The other
Right.
three-word sentence. Um, but sorry,
my main takeaway on this, were 90s indie rockers
L7.
L7 William
Hmm.
S. Hart fans?
I don't know, but I wonder that too. Right away I clocked
There was no
L7.
character called Andre in this.
Not that I noticed.
But I was wondering about that because it is a peculiar. I'm sure it's a coincidence, but it is. I'm sure lots of people think the same thing nowadays
I
watching this
see it
film.
now.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, I
no,
thought that it's very timely because I immediately went to data centers.
Yes.
I was like, oh, it's tech bros who are showing up who are like, we want to build a big tech or a big data center here. We need your water, and the local people are like, no, thank you. Um,
yeah, no, it's I it's an odd one. This I couldn't quite put my finger on what it is about it. Like you said, it does feel oddly contemporary and ahead of its time, but also massively old-fashioned, and especially some of the I thought some of the scenes of the kind of love interest just basically simpering by herself, and I thought, oh, come on now, we've moved on even from this at this point in earlier films that we've watched for this. That seemed a little bit retrograde and underwritten, right?
So the other William S. Hart wife or whatever, right? The governor, she's a much stronger, kind of more dynamic character. She runs in and she throws herself at not knowing that it's the twin brother, right? And then you have William S. Hart getting even more flustered. But yeah, yeah. But to your point, you're right. Jane Novak is not given a lot to do here, I think, unfortunately.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I actually quite enjoyed this film, and I watched it earlier today, and I think this is one of his better later films. I think it's probably, I mean, aside from his final film, which we're going to get to later, I think it's one of probably, if not one of, it's probably one of the best of his later films. He playing the three roles in this film is, he does it quite well, and I think that he just blends seamlessly into like all the garb that he has to wear. I mean, of course, his traditional cowboy garb, which we're used to seeing him in, but then the governor's garb and playing the father at the beginning, it's very seamless. Like again, like William S. Hart has taken a lot of raps on the chin for his acting, but I think he is a much better actor than he's given credit for. And that's why when we did review films like Cradle of Courage and The Whistle, well, Cradle of Courage is a noticeably lesser film. The Whistle is actually a profound piece of work and could show what he could do when he would venture outside of the Old West. It's like,
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You mentioned that
yeah.
he might not get the props that he deserves, and I think that is probably the main reason is because he didn't stray beyond the Western, and then people think you're a bit of a one-trick pony, right? But
Yeah, that's like
like you said,
that's
once you venture outside, and it's a bit more apparent to people who maybe can't pick up on the more subtle nuances, then it becomes apparent, huh? Oh, this dude can, yeah, he can be an astronaut or a man who sells chocolates, confectionaries, or whatever it is, right?
but then you do get to
Those
the other end of the
examples,
spectrum.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
do get to the other end of the spectrum. A film that I, had just recently reviewed on my blog, Blazing Justice, which is a blog where I review a lot of silent, cheapy westerns and B westerns from the sound era. I recently reviewed a film called Smoking Guns from 1934 with Ken Maynard. And in that film, there's at least it's supposed to be a Western, but for a good sizable chunk of the film, for at least 20 minutes worth of the film, or at least 20 minutes in, Ken Maynard is sporting a blonde wig, an obviously fake beard, and he's out in the jungle with this ranger fella fighting crocodiles. It's like, this is not what you want to see in a Western, you know?
I'm guessing you mean fighting stock footage of crocodiles.
Yeah, and really fake looking crocodiles at that. But to be fair, he exhausted probably all the. I mean, his film Wheels of Destiny is a much better film. If you ever get to see it, Wheels of Destiny with Ken Maynard, that's a much better representation of the work he was doing at Universal. I don't know what he was smoking when he did Smoking Guns, but God, Lord God bless him. And he tried to do something different.
I would love if someone would unearth a William S. Hart film in which he battles men in gorilla suits. Crocodiles. That would be great.
All right, everybody. And now we're going to move on to our final film of the night, which is Tumbleweeds, which is also William S. Hart's final film. Even though it's technically not the final film that he would appear in, he would appear in a film called Show People with Marion Davies, but this is his final de facto feature-length film that he produced himself and everything else. So, yeah, let's get into Tumbleweeds, which was released December 27th, 1925, It was preceded by two films that were unavailable for us to view, which are Wild Bill Hickok and singer Jim McKee. This was produced by the William S. Hart Company and distributed by United Artists and was reissued by Astor Pictures in 1939. It cost $312,000, which in 2026 would be $5,953,280.91. This was directed by King Baggett with a screenplay by C. Gardner Sullivan from a story by Hal G. Everts. And it was photographed by Joe August. And the cast consists of Don Carver being portrayed by William S. Hart, Molly Lassiter being portrayed by Barbara Bedford, Kentucky Rose being portrayed by Lucien Littlefield, Noel Lassiter being portrayed by Gordon Russell, Bart Lassiter being portrayed by Jack Murphy, Mrs. Riley being portrayed by Lillian Layton, and the old woman and the old man being portrayed by both Gertrude Clare and George Marion, respectively. There are more people listed in the cast, but they're minor players. In order for us to discuss this historical landmark film in William S. Hart's filmography, we have actually brought along a special guest. And this special guest is none other than noted filmmaker and the director of the Museum of Western Film History. And that is Mr. Steve Latshaw. Hello, Mr. Latshaw. How are you?
Hi, how are you, Gino? Clive, Nick, glad to be here.
The synopsis is quite long in the Diane Kazar-Kozarski book, but basically what Tumbleweeds is about is William S. Hart plays a character by the name of Don Carver who laments the oncoming homesteaders that are hoping to make Caldwell, Kansas their home. He begrudgingly accepts this, and he and his cohorts who run various ranches around deem this to be the end of the West. And but as soon as Don Carver meets beautiful Molly Lassiter, portrayed by Barbara Bedford, his feelings change, and he makes it a point to register for land, but unfortunately is arrested as a Sooner by Molly's no good brother and his friend Bill Friel. And then Bill has to find a way out of the bullpen so that he can make a mad dash through the thousands of others and claim the land for him and Molly to live on for the remainder of their lives.
Sooners being claim jumpers, basically, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the version of this film that we watched for this screening here is actually a part of a restoration that I'm currently working on with film historian Eric Grayson. There still is a missing reel and a missing part of the soundtrack that we're missing. And the reason why I say soundtrack is because we are restoring the 1939 Astor Pictures sound reissue that was released in theaters with William S. Hart's moving introduction. And from what I've seen of the 35 millimeter material and what I've been able to take a glance at prior to us releasing this, which hopefully we'll be able to do it within the next few years, is nothing short of immaculate and beautiful. And I think Clive and Nick can certainly attest to that from what they were able to see. I know Clive had seen this film once before, probably years ago, but I think that seeing it, in this type of a print, probably opened up your eyes to the beauty and the grandeur of this rather amazing epic film.
Yes, I mean, watching it, I'll get into it later, but watching it a second time in a better, well, it gave and it took away, but the taking away is to do with a larger context of the whole William S. Hart, because I hadn't seen much William S. Hart prior, and in those days that was the only one I'd seen, and I didn't have the looming shadow of Hell's Hinges across everything, which I now have, which is very difficult to get away from, because that is still the pinnacle for me, but we might get into that a bit later on.
Yeah, so I guess the first question that I have for Mr. Latshaw here is this was a film that William S. Hart produced for United Artists, which was a then new venture with, I believe, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, D.W. Griffith may have been a part of that venture, if I'm remembering correctly. And I think maybe even Chaplin, I'm not exactly sure on that, but this was his first and sadly his only film for United Artists, and he had been making films for Paramount Artcraft, and before that, he had been making films for Triangle with Thomas H. Ince. Now, what allured William S. Hart to producing this film for United Artists, and how did it come about?
If you're asking me, I have no idea. I do know that he was working with all of them at UA. He was up in years. I believe he was 62 at the time that he made it. There must have been a problem with his relationship with UA, because as I recall, when the film was released, they pretty much threw it away. They didn't really promote it very much, and it's why I think one of the reasons why he made a deal with Astor to reissue it in 1939 was because, you know, not a lot of people saw it on its first release. I don't know what caused the big ones for UA initially. It was Mary Pickford, Doug Fairbanks, Chaplin. I think D.W. Griffith was involved, and I believe Hart was involved with him too. I don't know the reasons why there was a problem with the film in terms of the distribution, or a sudden chill in his relationship with UA.
I think that I had read somewhere that I think the reason why Hart, took them to task, and I think eventually even took them to court for damages associated with the production of Tumbleweeds, is because they didn't promote it very well, is my general understanding, and also they had paired it with a lesser film, I believe a Rex the Wonder Dog or Rex the Wonder Horse feature, that was really a B feature, and I think that Hart sort of felt insulted by that, and took them to court for that. And I think that after that, he pretty much threw in the towel as far as filmmaking is concerned, because he had already, been dealt a heavy blow by his association with Thomas H. Ince, who, it must be said, was cheating Hart out of probably a lot of his intended earnings. And Hart once famously said that the reason why he took Fritz out of his films for a short time is because he didn't want Ince making money off of the sweat of Fritz's brow. So that's, I think, Hart was just finally done with the Hollywood system and how it treated him.
Well, I think another factor, and keep in mind, in 1925, Hart's style on screen was somewhat passé. I mean, by this point, he'd been overcome by Tom Mix, who was a very action-filled, adventurous cowboy star. He was very flamboyant. It was a completely different style from Hart's, realistic cowboy approach. And I think probably the marketing people at UA probably thought this is the same old-fashioned Hart movie, and we need to get as much money as we can out of this, but we're not going to spend a lot of money on promotion. Interestingly enough, one of the classic Westerns of the early 60s, Ride the High Country, directed by Sam Peckinpah, which everyone considers one of the great classics today, was thrown away by MGM. They put it out on a double bill as the bottom half of a double bill with a movie they did called The Tartars, and just threw it away in the United States, while Ride the High Country was getting rave reviews all over Europe and winning awards all over Europe. And it's a similar situation. The stars of Ride the High Country were Randolph Scott, whose film it would be the last, and Joel McCrea, and both of those guys were great in the film, but well past their prime from a marketing standpoint.
That was Guns in the Afternoon in the UK, right? If I remember.
Right. And I think Hart probably faced a similar situation in 1925, that, it's the same old Hart stuff, and we're not going to make as much money, so we're not going to put a whole lot of effort into this.
That's fascinating, because like you said, if you watch Ride the High Country now, it is a great film. But yes, it is from a different era, isn't it? It's not what Peckinpah is known for.
It's like a throwback.
No, plus think about this. the studios in the 1920s, when they thought of film, they thought of it in terms of being very disposable, that the life of any film, no matter how great it was, could maybe handle a few different reissues. And once sound movies came in, the studio perception of their silent classics was that it was just wasted space in a vault. I mean, they were regularly taking massive amounts of nitrate prints and destroying them in order to get the silver content, because that was the perceived value. Nobody thought of this stuff that, 100 years later it would be playing on TCM and being released on Blu-ray as classics. Nobody, there wasn't that attitude in those days. And so
why do you think, because I was thinking about it, it's remarkable really that Tumbleweeds did at least manage to get the kind of soundy reissue. Why do you think it might have been singled out? Because not that many films got the second attempt, right?
I believe it was singled out because he retained the rights to the film. I'm sure his deal with United Artists was purely a licensing deal. He licensed it to them for theatrical for whatever the period would have been, 2-3 years. And I'm sure the rights reverted back to him, which is why he instigated the deal with Astor. And you got to keep in mind, in the 1930s, there were a couple of different attempts to get Hart to return and make a series of sound B westerns. I don't remember the studio that approached him in the early 30s. It may have been Fox or Universal. That deal didn't happen. And then around 1936, Republic Pictures approached him and had serious talks with him about bringing him back and doing a series of William S. Hart B westerns. And that deal ultimately didn't happen. But Herbert Yates, who ran Republic, really wanted that to happen. And as I recall, when the sound reissue did happen of Tumbleweeds in 1939, I believe it was very successful on reissue and very much loved by audiences. And as late as 1946, which was about the time William Elliott met William S. Hart, shortly before Hart died, there was talk at Republic. By that point, Bill Elliott had become by 47, Bill Elliott had become an A-picture star at Republic. They took him out of the Red Ryder series, replaced him with Alan Lane, and put Bill in a series of big-budget A-westerns for Republic. And one of the projects Bill Elliott wanted to do, he very badly wanted to do a William S. Hart biopic, and it was considered for a while at that studio.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, seeing him kind of almost say it's almost like, I know it was a few years before he actually died, but almost it's almost like a deathbed kind of goodbye in the reissue version. Really makes you think, wow, we could have done with more of hearing this guy's voice, right? Because famously, a lot of the people from the silent era, apparently they just didn't have the voice for sound, but William S. Hart surely did. I think
Yeah,
he
you can feel
sounds fine to me.
Yeah, I mean, you know right away that he trod the boards, right? He's quite
he has a gravitas.
A powerful voice for a man who, at that point, I mean, in 39, how old is William S. Hart when he does this piece of film?
74, something like that, is it?
Yeah, he's still very much got the pipes for delivering. And I thought that exact thing too. It's kind of sad that one of the few pieces of audio we have of him is basically him saying goodbye. I loved this job, but I'm not physically able to do this anymore. It's too, and in seeing the film, I have to say, some of the writing that Bill does in that last film is amongst some of the most thrilling horse riding I've seen in any of the films we've watched up until this point.
No, it's clearly him, and the intro, I saw it first in the early 70s when I was like 14, and a local cable station ran it because it was public domain by that point. And he had that very declarative Shakespearean manner of speaking, but it was a great voice. I mean, you really enjoyed listening to his dulcet tones, and it was very emotional. It was so emotional that for 2024, for our Lone Pine Film Festival, we picked that that was the last film we showed of the festival, and that became our festival theme. We took a line from that opening where he says, "Oh, the thrill of it all."
But that was the overall name you gave the program, was The Thrill of It All.
Yeah. And we had a little piece inside that explained and quoted the entire speech that he gave in that film.
So the Tumbleweed screening went, you were saying, I think you were kind of re-emphasizing that with the intro and everything was quite an emotional, it went down well. It was
I'll tell you, we do a silent movie every year at the festival with live musical accompaniment, and that's always well attended. But I was in the screening for Tumbleweeds that year, and we were running what I think is probably the best available DVD, which was the Image DVD release from several years ago. And I don't know if it has the best score, but it seemed to be the best looking version. But I can tell you that audience, and we usually don't have a huge audience for the last film, but we had a nice size audience, and they were completely enthralled with the movie. Mm-hmm. And watching it again last week, it really sucks you in. I mean, I always like to say with silent movies and also with foreign films, it takes me about 15 minutes before my brain adjusts and I'm no longer conscious of the fact that I'm reading titles. And I recently read an interview with a couple of film directors in a Peter Bogdanovich book, and they were both talking about, we tried to figure out how to use as few titles as possible, but Tumbleweeds really sucks you in. And I think one of the things that Hart did, you talk about Hell's Hinges, which is a very dark film all the way. It's like the precursor for High Plains Drifter in a way.
Yeah.
And
why I like it.
Yeah. But the neat thing about Tumbleweeds is you see the humorous side of his character.
Right.
And which is unusual compared to his earlier films. You know, it humanizes him quite a bit. And you're really, I think the last 20 minutes, you're really emotionally caught up in the whole thing, especially when, she misunderstands his intentions, and it's really, and then he decides, this time I'm going to kill the snake you got in my way. It's really rich, really a rich film.
And of course you mentioned the chase, and
the land run is absolutely astonishing. I for a moment was almost pulled into Mad Max Fury Road levels of like thrill at just this thundering, massive people. I mean, there was also an element of almost wacky races in there too, with people on the penny farthing bicycles, but it completely works. I mean, and as I said, that watching Bill ride Hell for Leather to catch up and pass those people, and knowing that it's him, because you can, as you said, Steve, you can clearly see that is William S. Hart riding the horse.
It was fascinating for me as well, just because I'd seen it before, but I didn't realize what it was, because of course they excerpted it and put it in that compilation film, The Great Chase, right, from the 60s, with all that amazing footage from various films and stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, there's scenes where they have the camera really down low, so that they're thundering right over you, and I was just completely taken away by it.
The Mad Max Thunder Road comparison is very apt, because you just said that, and I thought, I was trying to think of what modern day movie this reminded me of, and that's it exactly. I mean, look at it. He was an incredible producer. I mean, he was. It's unfortunate that he got so soured on the whole industry, because he could have continued a career as a powerful producer, I think, well into the 1930s.
Yeah, the scope of that whole scene, the sheer number of extras, the sheer number of actors on screen. It's just I would say it's one of the highest budget things we've seen in a William S. Hart film, and it's sad that it's his last.
I'm assuming that they're digging ditches as well to put the camera down that low and stuff like that, little tricks like that, right, to be able to pull that off. I mean, it's an extraordinary sequence, really.
Yeah,
I mean, it would be extraordinary if you saw it now, but to see it 101 years ago is something else.
I think one of the things too, you're talking about a guy that his existence was on his own terms. I mean, he was all about Western stuff. He used to ride his horse in Newhall from his place over to on a Saturday over to Harry Carey's place, which was also in that area, but was a few miles away. I've been to both places, and he would come over on Saturday and sit down and drink whiskey with Harry Carey, but he would do it on horseback and he would do it in costume. I mean, it was like
Wow.
this was a life he wanted to live, and where Harry Carey lived was a trading post that Harry operated. So it was something he did apart from his acting. Like Joel McCrea was an actual cattle rancher, in spite of the fact, and he'd go into town to make his movies to help pay for his ranching. But Hart was very serious about it. Now, I think one of the things I really admire about him and this film is that he decided, if this is the last film I'm going to do, if there's a chance it's the last film I'm going to do, I'm going to make the best damn William S. Hart movie anybody has ever seen. And I think if anything soured him on the business, it was that the distributor mishandled the film, didn't realize what they had.
Right.
And that probably soured him on the old business, because 100 years later, time has proven him right. This was one of the greatest, if not the greatest Hart film ever made, and one of the greatest Westerns ever made. The fact
like,
that it can,
Charles Laughton getting slaughtered after doing Night of the Hunter, right? It's inconceivable now that everyone didn't just say, "That's amazing, Charles, make another one." But they just didn't.
Hollywood has had a long history of eating its young and also its elderly. I mean, Orson Welles was not treated well. Another genius. And the other thing about Hollywood, which is something I've seen myself for having been in the business for 30 plus years, that you don't retire from Hollywood. Hollywood retires you.
So we've talked about this already. The opening of the film, when William S. Hart speaks directly to camera, it feels like an elegy, but then the rest of the film feels like an elegy, right? Just by the nature of the story, right? This is a story of the Wild West becoming less wild, right? It's the story of the move from these huge open cattle ranches to a more family friendly, right? We have children showing up, we have women showing up,
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah, I mean, when William S. Hart is atop Fritz and he tells his camp, "Boys, this is the end of the West as we know it." That's pretty autobiographical, considering the fact that you have guys like Tom Mix and Ken Maynard and Hoop Gibson and all these cowboy stars rising up while Hart's star is on the decline. So I find it very ironic and very kind of bittersweet that he made this film as basically his goodbye film, and saying not only is it the Old West saying goodbye, but it's his Old West saying goodbye, and basically passing that torch.
Mm-hmm.
It would make an interesting double bill with Ballad of Cable Hogue or something like that.
Yeah, one of the things that was in existence in the 1920s in Hollywood was a group called, I believe they were called the Chuck Wagon Trailers, and I may not have the name right. It's in the read. There's an entire article about them in the 1993 reissue of Don Miller's B Westerns, which is an expanded version. But this was a group of real cowboys that had been working for decades on some of them older, some of them middle-aged, some of them had just been doing it for a few years, but they were all real cowboys. And as the great cattle drives ended in the late teens and early 20s, these guys, these real cowboys, gravitated to Hollywood and worked as extras and writers and background cowboys, etc. And sometimes some of them got featured roles in movies in the 20s and 30s, and eventually most of them had died out by the late 40s, early 50s. But these were real cowboys that became picture cowboys, became fake cowboys, because it was the only work left they could got. Just as the era of the cowboy and the cattle drive ended the era of recreating the cowboy and cattle drive began.
Right.
And so truth became fiction, but by the same guys.
Interesting.
But yeah, I was just saying, for me, there's this really strong, like this feeling of an elegy to the Old West that's quite beautiful and moving, and it reminded me in a weird way, and this is maybe an inappropriate connection to make, but of Sergio Leone's. He didn't actually direct it, but he kind of shepherded it into being My Name is Nobody, which has Henry Fonda kind of playing an older cowboy who's decided to flee the West and actually move back to Europe because he's amassed too many enemies over his life. And it also has a very strong feeling of kind of, although it's a comedy, there's still a feeling of emotion behind it. This idea of this way of life is coming to an end.
Like Steve was saying, that kind of mixture of when the real kind of Old West had died away and then the pretend came in, but then there was kind of, it's interesting that it seems to have been through the Hollywood lens, there's been several ends of the West, right? It keeps ending again and again and again, which in itself is a kind of fascinating concept that you can't quite let go of it. Like, because yeah, there's this 25, but 40 years after, Peckinpah was still bemoaning the end of the West.
The death of the West,
right?
yeah.
And you're thinking, well, how much did you know about the real Old West, Sam Peckinpah? You're not that old, right? But obviously he identified with it.
He did because his father was a judge, and Peckinpah was around all these old famous gunfighters and lawmen that were retired, and so he heard all the stories, and he went hunting and fishing with these guys. So Peckinpah was really, he knew that world.
Okay. He was like a repository of knowledge, I guess.
Also, he knew the manner of speaking that they spoke. I mean, a lot of the dialogue that Joel McCrea does in that film are things that Peckinpah's father, who was a real cowboy as well as a judge, said in the way he spoke. So he was pretty authentic.
Interesting.
If you ever see Peckinpah's TV series from the 50s, The Westerner, which I think lasted about 13 episodes with Brian Keith, it's one of the most, it's so different from the other 50s TV Westerns at that time. It's about as realistic a series as you will ever see about what real cowboys were like.
Cool.
No, I only know his rifleman stuff. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
And then for me, as an Irishman, I was kind of tickled when a woman who looks a lot like my granny shows up, and all of the stuff with I don't know if her name Ma Riley or whatever her name is, but who catches the eye of William S. Hart's kind of sidekick, and I thought all of that stuff could have been played in a kind of an ugly, mean-spirited kind of like Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo kind of a way, and instead it's treated quite sensitively. I mean, she's a woman of a certain age. She's not stereotypically attractive, but I think like if there's any fun, it's very, very light. And you do feel like she's a good thing. She's a tough lady. She's here in the West, and she's gonna beat her kids if they misbehave. That scene really seemed like my granny. Was when she was knocking one of her kids around.
Well, it's interesting because this role, the role of the widow Riley, is being portrayed by a woman by the name of Lillian Layton. The only other film that I know her from is the Ken Maynard film, $50,000 Reward, where she plays like a boarding house proprietor. And during that film, Ken Maynard, plays Tex Sherwood. He wants to come and stay at the boarding house. And all these guys are after him, right? Because he has this really valuable deeds of his land. And so Edward Pale, playing Buck Schofield, one of the guys who's after Ken Maynard, says, "Pull rank, cowboy." And then Lillian Layton comes out with a giant shotgun and says, "Pull rank yourself, Buck Schofield." So yeah, very. She played a lot of tough ladies.
Yeah, no, I was impressed. She was one of, for me, a standout element of the film.
The other thing it made me think of as well, towards the end of William S. Hart's kind of eulogy, almost, it could segue when he talks about the dust settling, and it could almost segue into they could have brought Ghost Riders in the Sky up on the soundtrack. It's very much got that kind of feel that he's going to go and join this kind of almost kind of angel like choir or something, and leave this world. But it's very. I was surprised how moving it was, actually. Like, considering it's after the fact, right? Like he's come back to it. It's not in the original, and he's not actually dying for a long time. But somehow he manages to really. It feels extremely heartfelt and not any way a cash grab or anything like that. It's kind of moving almost to the point of self-parody. It's so moving. Do you know? I found myself in that weird space where I was kind of laughing and almost crying at the same time because it's so uninhibited. I found it fascinating.
I thought it was the goodbye. Watching it again the other night, I thought it was the goodbye, a very dramatic goodbye of a. And if you've read his autobiography, that's how he writes as well. But it was the very dramatic goodbye of a 19th century Shakespearean actor. Is what that was. I mean, it was.
Right.
It was, but the heartfelt thing that really got to me was at the end of it, he takes his hat off.
Yes.
Bows his head, and then he turns around and he walks off into the distance. And I believe he still has his hat off, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
It's kind of like visually, and he was a silent movie performer, and the visual meant more. What you did on screen visually communicated something to audiences. And I think that gesture, the fact that he took off his hat, bowed his head to the audience, to the camera, and then turned around and walked away, but left the hat off. That was a powerful goodbye right there. That was an intentional
way he took his hat off as well. I don't see people take hats off. It was a very
it's an
underhand movement.
It was like when Harry Carey used to hold his arm, that John Wayne duplicated in the Searchers at the end of the Searchers. It's the same thing with the way Hart would always take his hat off, under and off that way.
Yes, it was. I noted it was very specific. It was it stood out. Yeah.
Now that you mention this, I had forgotten, but the very first Hart films we watched opened with this quite strange thing of a black screen with kind of curtains, and each of the actors coming out dressed in a full tuxedo, kind of introducing as an actor, and then being superimposed or kind of using fade or whatever to have their costume from the film on. Like, it was really foregrounding the artifice in a strange way of like, this is the actor, this is the role.
There's that 1916 version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as well, right? Where they all come out at the beginning and they doff their top hats to the camera. So,
but then it comes full circle. We're back now to his last screen performance, and he's back out almost again.
But as Steve was saying, it's less artifice. It feels more like the opposite, like removing the artifice. Like this is me, and this is fascinating.
Well, and I think having watched. Go ahead, Steve.
It also helps that his last story about, his horse, the ghost of the horse riding up and saying, "Hey, come on, boss, join us. We're heading for the last roundup where they're all waiting for us." I mean, that's heavy stuff, and to your earlier point about the guys coming out in normal, regular costume and then the beginning of the film, I do remember about that time in the mid-teens that they stopped referring to movies as Nickelodeon and started referring to them as photo plays. And maybe that was part of the reason we're presenting a photo play to you. Here are your actors.
Mm-hmm. We should bring back that terminology. I think go and see the new latest Marvel photo play.
Photo play. Chris Nolan's new photo play of the Odyssey.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, no. As I said, I wasn't expecting to be as moved, and maybe it's also we've just watched over the last several months. We've watched as much of the extant William S. Hart filmography as we've been able to see. So therefore, it's a bit more of a gut punch to me than it would have been if I'd seen this one first. But I am actually seeing this last after having
Yeah,
seen everything we
yeah,
could see, and
The
so
evolution of a film career right in front of you.
yeah, and
yeah,
I've become quite attached to William S. Hart over the last, from literally
yeah,
not knowing who the
yeah.
man was to now having a fairly good sense of what his career looked like, and seeing a number of shades of him, like from the kind of terrifying angel of death that appears in something like Hell's Hinges, to more comedic roles, to this, which is a kind of a balance of both. We have him as action hero and as kind of comedy. I think, does he fall over a chair in this one? He does
Yes.
in a lot of the latter films. He does a lot of getting flustered by pretty women and falling over chairs. Um, but yeah, it's yeah, I think that's where some of the sadness comes from.
Couple of legacy things I want to address before we're done with this. There was a book published in 2005, a screenwriting book that sort of became the Bible for most wannabe screenwriters for several years. It was a book called Save the Cat. And that specifically referenced one of the things that they suggested you do is when you're structuring your script is have a moment early on, say 5 minutes in, where your hero saves an animal, small child or something. But that's the save the cat moment that makes the audience fall in love with him, regardless of what a shit he might be for the rest of the film. And I'm watching Tumbleweeds, and a few minutes into the film, he's with those wolf pups and he's taking care of those wolf pups. And I thought, my God, this is a save the cat moment that he's doing in 1925 that filmmakers were doing literally 80 years later. And about 21 minutes into the movie, there's a camera set up on the wooden sidewalk of the western town, and it's not looking straight out at the street. It's on a slight diagonal so that you can see horses and wagons riding towards camera. That became the standard town POV shot in countless westerns for decades. And it's always on a slight angle, usually to the left.
Yeah.
Horses and wagons are coming down. And I thought,
That's true, yeah.
That's and finally,
I suppose it makes sense as well, doesn't it? Because you get more production value.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
On a diagonal, you're seeing the movement and everything else. The final thing, we were talking earlier about Wild Bill Elliott. One of the A westerns he made in 1949 for Republic was a movie called Hellfire, and it starred Bill Elliott as a guy who he gets in a dyed up in a saloon, and a minister. He's a drifting gambler. He plays a drifting gambler, and he gets in a dyed up with somebody in this saloon, and the guy he gets in the fight with is going to shoot him, and a minister steps in the way and gets shot. And he's racked with guilt that this minister got shot because trying to save his life. So Elliot kneels to the dying preacher, and he promises the preacher he will fulfill the preacher's lifelong goal of building a church. And so the rest of the movie is his attempt to get the money for this church. And there's a lot of complications. It involves more gunplay and so forth and so on. But it's a film that could have been written for William S. Hart. And it's currently streaming restored on Amazon Prime. It's available for rental or sale on Amazon Prime. But it could have been written for William S. Hart, this part. And you will also get a chance to see what Bill Elliott would have been like in a William S. Hart biopic, because he's playing the movie like Hart would have played the movie. Elliott was a huge fan of William S. Hart, and he really focuses his performance in this movie on and it really in a lot of his movies on what on a performance like William S. Hart. But I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, he has to have cast a shadow over the spaghetti western, because to me that was my kind of entry into the western growing up as a kid in Ireland. Was watching the Clint Eastwood Sergio Leone films, but their kind of like moral ambiguity, their kind of gray. We've talked about this a lot on the show as over the episodes, is something that I find very exciting about the William S. Hart films. It's a bit less black hat, white hat, good guy, bad guy, binary opposition. And yeah, I mean, I think that has to be one of his legacies too. I don't think there would be a Clint Eastwood if there wasn't a William S. Hart. I mean, I think they're kind of plumbing the same vein, I think.
Well, if they had made if they had made The Outlaw Josie Wales in 1922, wouldn't that have been a Hart film?
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
you're
you
right. I
mentioned
mean,
the Hell's Hinges, High Plains Drifter thing as well. Yeah.
hang him high for that matter too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you so much for giving us the time today. This
has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
My pleasure, and Gino, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Anytime. Anytime.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys, and
All right.
Take care.
See you, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, it's an. I mean, so obviously, we've already recorded our talk with Steve Latshaw with Tumbleweeds for time purposes. But I'm wondering, is there anything that we didn't have a chance to say then that we kind of want to maybe front load a little bit now? Is there anything about Tumbleweeds that we didn't talk about?
Well, I think it's odd, and what I think, and it's sad that we didn't get Steve's input on this particular aspect of the film, but I thought it was odd, and it was only done one other time in William S. Hart's filmography, where they actually give him a sidekick in Lucien Littlefield. I thought that was an odd choice, but I think it was a choice that was made to sort of make William S. Hart relevant again, like, I don't know, like, it's a great film. I love Tumbleweeds. That land rush scene is incredible, but I don't know, I even hate to say this because, I feel like just saying this would be considered sacrilege, but for me, knowing the William S. Hart of Hell's Hinges, the William S. Hart of Tumbleweeds is kind of a perversion of the character, I think, because he is that more lighthearted. He is a bit more comical,
I'm with you, Gino, because I think the thing with Tumbleweeds is it benefits massively from that Astor re-release and hearing William S. Just hearing him speak anyway, but hearing him speak so eloquently and so passionately. That combined with the chase sequence or the race, those are the things that elevate Tumbleweeds, I think. If you take those things away, I found the rest of it less exceptional and not much that we hadn't seen before. And yes, I can't help doing the same thing in comparison. And like I was saying, seeing Tumbleweeds many years ago when I had more my objective film critics hat on, when I kind of reviewed films in a slightly different way and I wasn't aware of anything else, I thought, oh yes, within the context of the time, this is a good Western from 1925. I didn't know any better. I didn't know that a Hell's Hinges existed, and I certainly hadn't seen it. And then seeing it, yeah, like I said, the shadow is, you can't get away from it. That film is, the more I think about it, it's such an extraordinary film. And within that context, Tumbleweeds is, you don't have, you don't, there doesn't have to be a winner, right? There doesn't have to be but there's no doubt that seeing Tumbleweeds post Hell's Hinges definitely puts it a little bit in which wasn't the case prior when I wasn't aware of there's a world before Hell's Hinges and there's a world after you've seen Hell's Hinges. It really is that epochal a film, I think, if you're talking about the world of Westerns. And I think obviously we talked about it when we did it on there, but I really do think it is one of those titles that lovers of Western film, because I'm sure there's plenty of lovers of Western films who have seen a wide range of Westerns from all over the world, may still not have picked up on Hell's Hinges.
Right. I think it's still one of those films that a lot of people, because it's a silent, haven't seen. I think the reason why Tumbleweeds is probably his most widely seen film is because it's been public domain for years and it's been on video. Been on countless
easy to
DVDs and
see.
such. Yeah, and I think it is due in part or mostly to that sound reissue, because you do have the sound effects, you do have the music track, you do have William S. Hart's introduction at the beginning. And I think all those things combined make Tumbleweeds that much more of an enriching experience. Because,
well, as Steve was saying as well, he was saying he sometimes acclimatizes to, and that would have for modern viewers, because it starts with him speaking and the sound effects and stuff, that would it would almost trick people into watching a silent film who might not normally watch a silent film, right?
Right.
Yeah, another a recurring. I mean, the title Tumbleweeds, right? There's a recurring like leitmotif in the film of the tumbleweed, right? We get the song at the beginning and then throughout the film about like basically like, because this is really the struggle between this concept of like the wide open West, right, where like a man can be a man, and then this more domesticated version of the West that's coming in that has children, that has women, that is gonna be about building homesteads and kind of smaller farms, not this kind of these wide open ranches. And I think so. To me, it makes it like so. Hell's Hinges is this other thing. That's the scary West. That's the West of that's the West of where like all bets are off, where things can go completely sideways at a moment's notice. Right. This is a West where we are seeing the edges being kind of worn away. It's a safer West. And that's
Hell's Hinges, I think, would also play. I think if adventure, unfortunate to need to call them that, but they would be nowadays adventurous viewers who will watch something silent. I think they would get on a lot better with Hell's Hinges now because of that. Because I think that I would imagine a lot of younger viewers watching Tumbleweeds now. They'll be watching the introduction, and he starts talking about this Cherokee strip kind of land grab, and and then even though it's a very heartfelt and everything, I'm not dissing it, but I'm just trying to see it through young people's eyes nowadays. William S. Hart gets teary-eyed about, well, all these cattle, ranchers, their way of life is changing, and there's a throwaway reference to the actual Cherokee, and there's like one kind of major Cherokee character who just gets on really well with William S. Hart, doesn't he? How are you? Oh, fine. I'm just a happy Indian over here. No. Go ahead. Grab my land. I don't care. I'm a happy. And so that whole part, I would imagine, would not play well with modern viewers now.
So what's interesting you should say that is that like right now in the other room, my wife is watching and has been watching for the last couple of days the brand new Netflix adaptation of Little House on the Prairie.
Oh.
Which is plumbing exactly the same material as Tumbleweeds in many ways. It's the end of that again, the coming of a more domesticated West, right? But it can't avoid these issues because it's a show made now.
Exactly.
So their front and center of this new series is like what is going on with I can't remember if it's the Choctaw, but anyway, whichever group it is in the story. The scripts are much more cagey and sensitive around making sure that they're acknowledging.
You can imagine a modern audience like kind of being slightly cynical about William Hart's monologue in a way, because at the back of the mind they'll be thinking, well, what about this other
Right.
group
First
of people who
Beatles,
you're
yes.
not really addressing?
But anyway, so then I was going to say, the final image of the film is actually quite beautiful and quite touching, and also quite sad. It's the image, like the very last image of the film is this fence. They fenced in the West, and the tumbleweeds are getting caught in the fence. The tumbleweeds can no longer blow free, and it's obviously this is the Cowboys, right? The Cowboys are if they were the tumbling tumbleweeds. Well, now they're dads, they're family men, they're farmers, not ranchers, and there is something, I don't know, there's something touching about the thing. So yeah, I agree. It's no Hell's Hinges. So it surprised me to read in reviews people claiming this is the one, this is the best William S. Hart film, because it's not. There are a number of others that would claim that it's certainly Hell's Hinges, but in pieces, the land grab segment is amongst the finest things William S. Hart was involved in. Like that.
And again, I think maybe
taken out.
Because that was included in The Great Chase, I think that's why people found their way to Tumbleweeds via that, which is why it's more well known than Hell's Hinges, for example.
But yeah, I'm interested in the idea. We did talk before about maybe coming back at some point and doing an episode where we just kind of talk about, we go back, quickly look at the filmography and do our own top 5 choices, and we'll see how, if they line up or don't line up.
My top 5 are Hell's Hinges, Hell's Hinges, Hell's Hinges, Hell's Hinges, Hell's Hinges. But we could talk about.
I know what Nick's top 5 is. It's Hell's Hinges, The Whistle, The Whistle, The Whistle, The Whistle.
It might be. There's a couple of other ones I liked a lot in there as well.
Well, we could talk about the books. Either we could talk about books about William S. Hart, or he himself, of course, wrote some short stories and stuff as well, right?
I would love to do the books, and I would love to do the documentary, right? Do you know that
yes.
you've had?
Oh yes, the saga of William S. Hart.
Yeah. So maybe that can be the focal point, is the doc, and then around it we can do the other ephemera.
I want to read his autobiography for sure.
So we'll have one last hurrah of an episode. They'll probably take us a little while to read all the material and stuff like that, but there'll be one kind of extended coda to this, I think.
And potentially we can even talk about the shorts, the parodies, right? The Buster Keaton, and there's at least one other parody of the William S. Hart oeuvre, however you say that word.
Well, so again, actually, now that you mention that, then I will bring up one thing before we, because I didn't want it, but so if we're thinking that Tumbleweeds, the reissue, was a reasonable hit, right? And going back even to those days, that you would have had, Mad Magazine style parodies of, well-known films and everything like that. I can kind of imagine the heartfelt goodbye that William S. Hart gives in the reissue version. It hits us more now, I think, because it's posthumous. And we know he was going to die, less than a decade later. However, at the time, he's still kicking around, right? And he hasn't yet passed.
If you want, I could read a contemporary review.
Yeah, but okay. But what I was going to say is, I was wondering, because at certain points, it's so kind of it like I said, it borders on self-parodic, and I wouldn't be surprised if that which now seems to us as touching, I wouldn't be surprised if someone might have kind of made fun of it or done a parody of it in some other film or in some other. But yeah, go ahead, Gino.
Yeah, this comes from the Film Daily, May 9th, 1939. For the first time, that great Western actor who set the standard for all Western stars who followed, Bill Hart, appears on the screen in close-up and speaks. And what he says is not just an ordinary speech. He makes you understand and feel what the old-timers felt about their Western country. But the big surprise that will come to everybody is the remarkable quality of Hart's voice. It is one of the most vibrant, dramatic, and emotional male voices that has ever been heard on the screen. If Hart was a younger man and he came into pictures today, he would zoom to the top of one of our finest actors. He will prove a revelation to all motion picture lovers who remember this greatest of the Western stars in the silent days.
Okay.
Very respectful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But do you kind of see what I mean? Like it does sometimes cross over into it's almost a bit
it's
too
full on,
much.
but
Yeah.
strangely, there is. I mean, I did feel a palpable sense of grieving and loss in a strange way while watching the film and realizing that this show is coming to an end and that we've worked through what we can work through in terms of the filmography. And I just kept thinking, I wished that he had gotten to work earlier, or that like what you were just saying there, or that he had been younger. Yeah, I have a feeling that like I would have loved to have seen more. I'd love. I know that there are more films. We just can't see them. Either they've been lost, or they're in private collections. But yeah, I thought I could easily do another 10, 15 William S. Hart films if we could find them.
If you think of him bowing out as well, right? Like when he did, and then for context, like imagine if he'd have come back, because the same years you get, or around the same time as the Astor re-release, Stagecoach comes in.
Yes.
And reinvents the Western for a new generation. And to have seen him step into that in his twilight years and had in that reinvigorated, to have seen, you imagine William S., working with John Ford,
Yeah.
Yes, I was about to say that. Like, imagine him slipping into some of those roles that Harry Carey would slip into.
Like an old timer, an old coot or something.
Yeah, like a character actor. He could have been the one to earn the Oscar for, what was it, Mr. Deeds Goes to Washington or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
To consider.
So that the feeling, ultimately this last two films, but especially Tumbleweeds, leaves you with is a bit of a feeling of loss and a bit of a feeling of like what could have been, right?
Right.
So again, Gino, thanks, because really, Bill Hart was not on my radar at all before we started the show.
Oh, same here.
And it's been it's been a really valuable education for me.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I love doing is introducing people to stuff that I love, because there's, especially with the stuff that I like, there's basically a 99.9% chance that they have never either heard of it, seen it, or maybe I have some familiarity with it, but not enough to really fully ingratiate themselves into the world. I mean, that's what I'm doing with the cheapy silent westerns. That's what I'm doing with the B westerns. And with my blog and with my television program. And I just hope that with the work that I'm doing, the small work that I'm doing, I'm hoping that I'm, basically drawing reinterest into this genre of film and this subsection of film that's really been dead for well over like 50 plus years, maybe even more. So yeah, if anything, if my ultimate legacy is the fact that I brought westerns back and that I was able to cause discussion of these films again, then I would have done my job, I think.
Well, you got two converts, so.
And you also, we never know, right? There's somebody who can stumble across this a couple of years from now. They might find this. The internet is good that way. Kind of things go on forever. And then maybe one of these people will grow up to be a filmmaker who kind of does touch on this stuff, right? When you're seeding the world in that way, just expressing your enthusiasm and excitement for things, sharing them with others, you don't know what's going to come of it, but almost always something does.
Yes,
right?
Let's hope that person grows up to be a filmmaker and not, a Timothy McVeigh or someone who blows things up and then says, well, it was Gino, Clive, and Nick, and they made me think what we've lost.
Or Lindsay Clancy.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about that. I don't think we've dropped too many.
Well, no, but you can never choose who you influence, right? When it comes to psychopaths, they it's out of your hands, right?
This is true. Thanks for leaving us on that downer note, Clive. Luckily, we have.
I'm not Mr. Tumbleweeds. I'm Mr. Hell's Hinges.
But just for one moment back to because you wouldn't have appreciated this, but I thought those two little boys that played the Hart kids were quite cute. I know you're not a big fan of the child actor, Clive, but I thought those two little munchkins, acquitted themselves quite well in their roles as baby William S. Harts. Um,
And speaking of kids, the widow Riley's main son, like the big fat kid,
yeah.
dude, I'm telling you, dead ringer for Leave It to Beaver's Larry Mondello. If
Oh,
you ever saw that show,
no.
Larry freaking Mondello, bro, Rusty Stevens, man.
Okay.
Like, he was the guy that should have stayed on that show. He should have stayed on as Beaver's friend. Like, forget Whitey and all these other people. No, Larry Mondello was the best friend that Beaver ever had, and I'm willing to fight anyone who says differently.
Well, you don't have to fight me because I've never seen Leave It to Beaver.
Right. But
Right. Okay.
Anyway, okay.
Ride us out for the penultimate time then, Gino.
All right. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this episode number 15 of Heart to Heart, the William S. Hart podcast. I have been Gino Cuddy, and I've been joined by my co-hosts Nick Sheehan and Clyde Davis. You can find us on pretty much every
Steve Latshaw.
And Steve Latshaw, yes, of course. And you can find us pretty much on every podcasting platform: Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We're on iHeartRadio podcasts, wherever you can find great podcasts like this. You could also join the Facebook group, the Heart to Heart William S. Hart podcast Facebook group, and you could join in some discussion there. There was actually recently a great post there about somebody who created a William S. Hart statue
Yes.
in his spare time, which was really nice. So yeah, come to our group and just chat William S. Hart with us. So above all else, thank you all for joining us, and hope you have a great night. And in the words of William S. Hart, adios amigos. God bless you all, each and every one.
This has been a Gino Cuddy podcast production.